The news traveled across the galaxy faster than anyone thought possible. Within hours, every spacefaring civilization knew what had happened at New Terra. The Vorthon Empire, the most feared military force in known space, had been completely destroyed in 57 seconds by a species most aliens considered primitive. On the bridge of the UES Defiant, Admiral Morrison watched rescue ships moving through the debris field. Human medical teams worked alongside alien survivors, treating wounds and saving lives without asking which species the patients belonged to. It was something the galaxy had never seen before. Captain Lisa Grant approached Morrison with a datapad full of messages. "Sir, we're receiving communications from all over the galaxy. Everyone wants to talk to us." Morrison looked at the list of names. The Centauran Republic, the Rigelian Federation, the Altarian Commonwealth. Every major government in known space was trying to contact Earth. Many of these same governments had refused to help humanity just days before. "What about the Galactic Council?" Morrison asked. Grant's expression was carefully neutral. "Chancellor Velak has requested an emergency meeting. He says the Council wants to discuss immediate military cooperation with humanity." Morrison almost smiled. 3 days ago, the Council had voted to abandon humanity to the Vorthons. Now they wanted to be humanity's best friends. Politics never changed, no matter what species was involved. "Tell the Chancellor we'll consider his request," Morrison said. "After we finish cleaning up the mess his council refused to help us with." Commander Ryan Phillips was coordinating the rescue operations from his station. Human ships were pulling Vorthon survivors from damaged vessels and providing medical care. The aliens looked confused and frightened. They had expected to be killed or enslaved, as was normal in their culture. "Admiral, the Vorthon prisoners are asking strange questions," Phillips reported. "They want to know when the executions will begin and how long they'll be kept as slaves." Morrison walked over to where Commander Vextel, the highest-ranking surviving Vorthon, was being held under guard. The alien officer's wounds had been treated by human doctors. He was sitting in what humans considered a comfortable chair, though he looked like he expected to be tortured at any moment. "Commander Vextel," Morrison said gently, "you and your people will not be executed. You will not be enslaved. You will be held as prisoners of war according to human military law." Vextel stared at Morrison with large, confused eyes. "I do not understand. We destroyed your colonies. We killed millions of your people. Why do you not take revenge?" Morrison sat down across from the alien commander. "Because revenge doesn't bring back the dead, Commander. And because someone has to break the cycle of violence that has plagued this galaxy for centuries." "But this is not how war works," Vextel protested. "The strong conquer the weak. The victors enslave the defeated. This is the natural order." "Maybe it was," Morrison replied. "But humans are going to try a different way." Across the galaxy, the reactions to humanity's victory were immediate and dramatic. On the Centauran homeworld, President Talvar called an emergency session of Parliament. The Centaurans had been the next target on the Vorthon invasion list. They had expected to be fighting for their survival within months. "The humans have done the impossible," President Talvar announced to the packed assembly hall. "They have defeated the Vorthons in open battle. We must immediately open formal diplomatic relations with Earth." Similar scenes played out on dozens of worlds. Species that had lived in fear of the Vorthons for generations suddenly found themselves free. The galactic balance of power had shifted, completely in less than an hour. But the most important reactions came from unexpected places. On backwater worlds and forgotten colonies, slave populations that had been captured by the Vorthons began to hope for the first time in years. If someone could defeat the Vorthons, maybe someone could free them too. Captain Ben Turner was leading salvage operations when he received a priority message from Earth. "Admiral, you need to see this," he told Morrison over the communication system. The message was from President Sarah Kim of the Earth Federation. Her face appeared on the main screen, and she looked like she hadn't slept in days. "Admiral Morrison, congratulations on your victory. The entire planet is celebrating. But we have a situation developing here that you need to know about." Morrison frowned. "What kind of situation, Madam President?" We're being contacted by representatives from over 60 different species. They all want the same thing: military alliances with humanity. Some are offering technology, others are offering territory, and a few are offering to become human. Protectorates. Morrison rubbed his forehead. He had been expecting this, but not so quickly or on such a scale. President Kim continued. There's more, Admiral. We're receiving messages from slave worlds throughout former Vorthon space. They're asking for human help to free themselves from their remaining captors. Colonel Amy Davis looked up from her reports. Sir, we have the resources to help some of them. My Marines could liberate several worlds if we act quickly. Morrison thought about it carefully. Humanity had just proven they could fight and win against impossible odds. But with victory came responsibility. The galaxy was looking to them for leadership they had never asked for. Madam President, tell our new friends that humanity is willing to discuss alliances based on mutual respect and shared values, Morrison said. We won't be anyone's protector or master, but we'll stand with those who believe in freedom and peace. He paused and looked around the bridge at his officers. These people had just changed galactic history. They deserved to know what came next. As for the slave worlds, we'll help anyone who asks for it. But we're not going to build an empire. We're going to build something better. Commander Sarah Walsh brought up a new display showing human space and the surrounding systems. Admiral, what exactly are we going to build? Morrison smiled, and this time it was a genuinely happy expression. We're going to build a galaxy where no one has to be afraid anymore, Sarah. Where species can develop and grow without worrying about being conquered or enslaved. The communication system activated with an incoming message. Captain Nick Hayes appeared on screen from his position near the hyperspace jump point. Admiral, we have incoming ships. Multiple species, all flying peaceful approach vectors. It looks like everyone wants to talk to us personally. Morrison nodded. Let them come. Captain, it's time for humanity to take its place in galactic civilization. Not as conquerors, but as protectors of those who can't protect themselves. In the months that followed, historians would mark the Battle of New Terra as the end of the age of fear and the beginning of the human era. Not because humanity conquered the galaxy, but because they chose to free it instead. The Vorthon Empire was finished, its remaining territories liberated by human-led coalitions of former victims. The Galactic Council was reformed with new principles based on cooperation rather than submission to the strongest. And in the military academies of 100 worlds, young officers learned new tactics based on human innovation and coordination. But more importantly, they learned new principles based on human values of mercy, protection, and justice. Admiral Morrison kept his promise. Humanity didn't build an empire. They built something that had never existed before in galactic history, a civilization based on the idea that the strong should protect the weak, not exploit them. The galaxy would never be the same, and that was exactly what humanity had intended. Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the UES Defiant, watching the stars through the main view screen. The ship was small compared to the massive battleships back at Earth, but it was home, to him and his crew of 43 people. They had been patrolling the outer edge of human space for 6 months now, checking on mining stations and making sure trade routes stayed safe. Morrison was a tall man with graying hair at his temples. He had been in the Space Navy for 20 years, and this was supposed to be his last tour before retirement. The Defiant was not a warship built for big battles. It was a frigate designed to handle pirates and rescue stranded ships. Its weapons were basic, and its shields could only take so much punishment before breaking. Lieutenant Amy Carter walked up to him, holding a datapad in her hands. She was his first officer, a sharp woman in her early 30s who had graduated top of her class from the Naval Academy. Captain, we're getting some strange readings from the New Haven system, she said, her voice showing concern. Morrison turned to look at her. What kind of readings? Energy signatures we've never seen before, very powerful. And there are reports of ships that don't match any known designs. Carter handed him the datapad. The automated beacon from New Haven went silent 3 hours. Ago. Morrison felt a cold feeling in his stomach. New Haven was a colony world with 12 million people living on it. It was one of the newer human settlements, built around mining operations in a rich asteroid field. If some in the official records of galactic military history, the Battle of New Terra was recorded with a simple entry. Duration, 57 seconds. Outcome, total human victory. Significance, changed everything. But Admiral Morrison preferred the way Commander Vextal described it in his surrender statement, the day the humans taught the galaxy that there was a better way to be strong. The Defiant moved closer to the alien fleet, its small form dwarfed by the massive crystal ships. Morrison stood on the bridge, his hands steady despite the fear in his chest. He had faced pirates and smugglers before, but nothing like this. Open a communication channel, Morrison ordered. Carter worked at her station, trying different frequencies. Channel open, sir. Morrison stepped forward. Alien vessels. This is Captain Jake Morrison of the United Earth ship Defiant. I request immediate communication with your commander. For a moment, there was only silence. Then the main screen flickered, and an image appeared that made several crew members step backward. The creature on the screen was tall and thin, with pale blue skin that seemed to glow. Its eyes were completely black, and when it spoke, its voice sounded like metal scraping against stone. I am War Commander Thexazal of the Zephyrian Hegemony, the alien said. You are human, yes? Another primitive species that thinks it can stand against us. Morrison kept his voice calm. We don't want to fight you. We just want safe passage for our civilian ships. They're carrying families and children. The alien's face showed what might have been amusement. Safe passage? You do not understand, human. We are the Zephyrian Hegemony. We have conquered over 200 worlds. We have destroyed civilizations that existed for thousands of years. Before your species learned to make fire, you have nothing we want except your surrender. Then let the civilians go, Morrison said. They're not soldiers. They can't hurt you. All beings serve the hegemony or die, Thexazal replied. This is the way it has always been. This is the way it will always be. Your people will serve us, or they will join the others who chose death. Morrison felt anger building inside him. And if we refuse? Then you will die quickly instead of slowly. It makes no difference to us. The alien leaned forward. You command one small ship. We have a fleet that has never known defeat. Be wise, human. Surrender now. Morrison looked at his crew. They were all watching him, waiting for his decision. He thought about the 12 million people on New Haven, about the families trying to escape in cargo ships and passenger liners. He thought about his duty as a human being. No, Morrison said simply. The alien's expression changed to something that looked like anger. Then you will die for nothing. The communication ended, and the screen went dark. All hands, battle stations, Morrison ordered. Throughout the ship, alarms began to sound. The first Zephyrian ship to attack was a destroyer, about twice the size of the Defiant. It fired a beam of energy that should have cut the human ship in half. But something strange happened. The beam hit the Defiant's shields and scattered, causing only minor damage. What the hell was that? Brooks asked from her weapons station. Chief Walsh was already running diagnostics. Captain, their weapon went right through our shields, but our fusion reactor created some kind of interference pattern. It disrupted their beam. Morrison didn't understand the science, but he understood opportunity. Can you do it again? I can try to boost the reactor output, Walsh said. But it's dangerous. If I push it too hard, we could blow up. Do it, Morrison ordered. The Defiant fired back with its small missiles and laser cannons. The weapons hit the Zephyrian ship but seemed to do no damage at all. The alien vessel had some kind of phase technology that let most attacks pass right through it. But Walsh was working magic in the engineering section. He rerouted power from life support and artificial gravity, pushing the fusion reactor beyond its normal limits. Unstable plasma began venting from the ship's exhaust ports, creating a cloud of superheated gas around the Defiant. When the Zephyrian destroyer tried to fire again, something unexpected happened. The plasma cloud disrupted their phase technology, and suddenly the alien ship became solid. Brooks didn't waste the chance. She fired everything the Defiant had at the destroyer. The alien ship staggered under the impact. Its crystal hull cracked, and strange blue fluid began leaking into space. It was the first time in 300 years that a Zephyrian ship had been damaged in battle. "Impossible," came Thexazal's voice over the communication system. "How did you do that?" Morrison smiled grimly. Human ingenuity. More Zephyrian ships began moving toward the Defiant. Morrison realized they were in serious trouble. His ship had hurt one enemy vessel, but there were dozens more, and the Defiant was already taking damage. "Amy, how are the evacuation ships doing?" Morrison asked. Carter checked her instruments. "Still 3 hours until they're clear, sir. The civilian ships are moving as fast as they can, but they're not built for speed." Morrison made another hard decision. "We need to buy them more time. Set course for the asteroid field near New Haven. If we're going to make a stand, let's pick our own ground." The Defiant turned toward the asteroid field, trailing plasma and sparks from damaged systems. Behind them, the entire Zephyrian battle group began to follow. War Commander Thexazal was no longer interested in the evacuation ships. He wanted to destroy the one vessel that had dared to hurt his forces. As they entered the asteroid field, Walsh came up to the bridge. His uniform was covered in sweat and burn marks from working on the overloaded reactor. "Captain, I've been thinking about what happened back there," Walsh said. "Our technology is different from anything they've seen before. We might be primitive, but we're primitive in ways they don't expect." Morrison nodded. "What do you need?" "Time to modify our weapons, and maybe some of those mining charges the evacuation ships are carrying." Morrison looked at the asteroid field around them, then at the approaching alien fleet. One human ship against an enemy that had conquered the galaxy. The odds were impossible, but sometimes impossible was all you had. "Get to work, Chief. Let's show them what humans can do." The Defiant moved deeper into the asteroid field, weaving between massive rocks that had once been part of a planet. Morrison watched the tactical display as the Zephyrian ships followed them, their crystal hulls glowing with alien energy. The enemy was being careful now, no longer treating the humans as harmless prey. "Chief Walsh, how are those modifications coming?" Morrison asked over the intercom. Walsh's voice crackled back through the speakers. "Almost done, Captain. I've rigged our torpedo tubes to fire mining charges instead of regular warheads. And I've got the reactor running hot enough to melt steel." Morrison nodded. The plan was simple but dangerous. Use the asteroids for cover, hit the enemy ships when their phase technology was disrupted, and try to stay alive long enough for the evacuation to finish. "Contact from the evacuation fleet," Carter reported. "They're asking if we need assistance." "Tell them to keep running," Morrison said. "We'll handle this." The first Zephyrian ship entered the asteroid field, a sleek cruiser that was 3 times the size of the Defiant. It fired at the human ship, but Morrison was ready. He ordered the ship to dive behind a large asteroid, using the rock as a shield. "Now, Chief," Morrison shouted. Walsh vented more plasma from the reactor, creating a cloud of superheated gas around the asteroid. When the Zephyrian cruiser tried to phase through the rock to get at the Defiant, the plasma interfered with their technology. Suddenly, the alien ship was solid and stuck halfway through the asteroid. "Fire!" Brooks yelled. The Defiant launched 3 modified torpedoes loaded with mining charges. The explosions tore through the cruiser's hull, sending pieces of crystal and metal spinning through space. The Zephyrian ship broke apart, its crew dying in the vacuum. War Commander Thexazal's voice filled the bridge, full of rage. "You cannot. Hide forever, humans, we will crush you." But Morrison was already moving to the next position. The Defiant used its small size to dart between asteroids, always staying 1 step ahead of the enemy. When another Zephyrian ship got too close, the humans would create another plasma cloud and strike, while the enemy was vulnerable. The battle went on for hours. The Defiant's hull was scarred with burn marks, and several sections had lost atmosphere. 3 crew members had been injured when an alien beam had punched through the ship's armor, but they were still fighting, and they had destroyed 4 Zephyrian ships. "Captain," Carter said, her voice tight with stress. "We're getting multiple contacts. More Zephyrian ships are entering the system." Morrison looked at the tactical display and felt his heart sink. What had been a battle group of 20 ships was now a fleet of over 50. The Zephyrians were calling in reinforcements, determined to destroy the single human vessel that had dared to resist them. "How much longer for the evacuation?" Morrison asked. 2 hours, sir. Maybe less if they push their engines harder." Morrison made another decision that would define the battle. All stop. Full power to shields and weapons. The Defiant came to a halt next to the largest asteroid in the field, a rock the size of a small moon. The ship's crew worked frantically to prepare for what they knew would be their final stand. Brooks had been thinking about the enemy's weaknesses. "Captain, I have an idea. What if we don't wait for them to come to us?" Morrison looked at her. "What do you mean?" "Their phase technology works by shifting them slightly out of normal space. But when Chief Walsh creates those plasma clouds, it pulls them back. What if we could create a bigger cloud?" Walsh caught on immediately. "The asteroid we're sitting on has a lot of ice in it. If we could crack it open and superheat the water..." Morrison understood. "A steam cloud big enough to disrupt their entire fleet." "It would mean getting very close to that asteroid," Carter warned. "If we miscalculate, we could be caught in the explosion." Morrison looked around the bridge at his crew. They were tired, scared, and wounded, but they were still fighting. "Better than dying slowly. Do it." The Defiant moved closer to the asteroid, so close that the ship's hull almost touched the rock surface. Walsh pushed the reactor to its absolute limit, creating temperatures that should have melted the ship's engines. Meanwhile, Brooks loaded every mining charge they had left into the torpedo tubes. The Zephyrian fleet was closing in from all sides, their ships forming a circle around the asteroid. War Commander Thexazal wanted to make sure the humans had no chance to escape. "Now," Morrison shouted. The Defiant fired every torpedo at once, the mining charges punching deep into the asteroid before exploding. At the same time, Walsh vented the reactor's entire plasma output directly at the cracks in the rock. The result was spectacular. The asteroid didn't just crack, it exploded into a cloud of superheated steam and debris that expanded outward at incredible speed. The Zephyrian ships, caught in the middle of their attack formation, suddenly found themselves trapped in a cloud that made their phase technology useless. "All weapons fire at will," Morrison ordered. The Defiant, protected by the asteroid's shadow, opened fire on the helpless Zephyrian ships. Without their phase technology, the alien vessels were just as vulnerable as any other ship. The human weapons tore through their hulls, causing explosions that lit up the steam cloud like fireworks. When the cloud finally cleared, half the Zephyrian fleet was gone. The survivors were scattered and confused, their perfect formation broken. For the first time in 300 years, a Zephyrian commander had been outfought by an enemy they had considered primitive. Morrison looked at the tactical display and smiled. The evacuation ships were almost clear of the system. They had bought the time they needed, but the battle was far from over. News of the battle at New Haven spread through human space faster than anyone thought possible. Captain Pete Johnson was hauling cargo between mining stations when he heard the emergency broadcast. A single human ship was fighting an entire alien fleet and winning. Johnson changed course immediately, his cargo ship Lucky Strike heading toward New Haven at maximum speed. He was not alone. Across human space, civilian ships were turning toward the battle. Colony engineer Maria Santos left her construction project and took command of an old transport ship. Retired Navy pilot Colonel Sam Mitchell gathered a group of other veterans and commandeered whatever ships they could find. By the end of the first day, 20 civilian ships had arrived at New Haven. By the end of the second day, there were over 100. They came in cargo haulers, passenger liners, mining ships, and even small pleasure craft. None of them were warships, but they all carried one thing the Zephyrians had never faced before: humans who refused to give up. Morrison stood on the bridge of the Defiant, looking at the growing fleet around his ship. The little frigate was barely holding together. Its hull was patched with metal plates, and 3 of its engines were not working. But it had become something more than just a ship. It had become a symbol. "Captain," Carter said, "I'm getting reports from all the civilian ships. They want to know what they can do to help." Morrison shook his head. "These people aren't soldiers. They don't have weapons or armor. If they stay here, they'll die." Chief Walsh walked onto the bridge, his uniform black with grease and burn marks. "Sir, I've been talking to some of the engineers on those ships. They have ideas. Good ideas. Morrison listened as Walsh explained what the civilians were planning. Maria Santos had figured out how to turn asteroid mining platforms into weapon stations. Colonel Mitchell was organizing the civilian pilots into attack squadrons. Even Captain Johnson had modified his cargo haulers to carry makeshift missiles. "They're not trained for this," Morrison said. "No, sir, they're not," Walsh agreed. "But they're human, and humans don't run when their neighbors are in trouble." Morrison made his decision. "Signal all ships. We'll coordinate our defense from here." The Zephyrian response was swift and brutal. War Commander Thexazal had been humiliated by his losses to a single human ship. When Overlord Kethamor arrived with the main invasion fleet, Thexazal was ready to crush the human resistance once and for all. The new Zephyrian fleet was massive. Over 200 crystal ships filled space around New Haven, their hulls glowing with deadly energy. At the center was Kethamor's flagship, a vessel so large it looked like a floating city. By the ancient codes, Kethamor's voice boomed across all frequencies. "You humans will surrender or be destroyed. We have conquered civilizations that ruled the galaxy when your world was still cooling. You cannot stand against us." Morrison looked at the impossible odds facing them and smiled. "We'll see about that." The battle that followed was unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. The humans fought with a creativity that no military academy would teach. Mining ships used their drilling equipment as weapons. Cargo haulers rammed Zephyrian vessels while their crews escaped in lifeboats. Even passenger liners were modified to carry weapons, their luxury cabins turned into ammunition storage. Maria Santos had turned the asteroid mining platforms into a network of weapon stations that could move and hide among the rocks. When Zephyrian ships tried to attack them, the platforms would shift position, always staying one step ahead of the enemy. Colonel Mitchell led squadrons of small ships in hit-and-run attacks, using the civilian vessel's small size to dart between the larger alien ships. The Zephyrians had never faced opponents who were willing to sacrifice their own ships to damage the enemy. But the most important discovery came from the ship's artificial intelligence. The Defiance AI, called Atlas, had been studying Zephyrian communications and technology for weeks. It began to understand how the alien systems worked and found new ways to disrupt them. "Captain," the AI's voice came through the speakers, "I have learned to mimic Zephyrian command frequencies. I can create confusion in their fleet communications." Morrison grinned. "Do it." Atlas began broadcasting false orders to the Zephyrian ships, sending them to wrong positions and creating chaos in their formations. The aliens, who had relied on perfect coordination for 300 years, suddenly found their own technology working against them. The siege of New Haven stretched into its third week. Every day brought new human ships to the battle, and every day the humans found new ways to fight. They learned from every engagement, adapted to every enemy tactic, and never stopped trying new ideas. The Zephyrians were learning something they had never expected to learn. These humans were not like the other species they had conquered. Other civilizations had fought logically, following military doctrine and accepted tactics. Humans embraced chaos. They used whatever worked, no matter how crazy it seemed. When conventional weapons failed, humans used mining equipment. When their ships were damaged, they turned the wreckage into weapons. When they ran out of missiles, they loaded their torpedo tubes with garbage and launched it at enemy ships. War Commander Thexal found himself facing an enemy that grew stronger with every defeat. The humans learned from their mistakes and never made the same error twice. Worse, they were unpredictable. Just when the Zephyrians thought they understood human tactics, the humans would do something completely different. By the end of the third week, the impossible had happened. The Zephyrian hegemony, which had conquered over 200 worlds, was being held in place by a collection of civilian ships and one badly damaged frigate. And across the galaxy, other species were beginning to take notice. The explosion of the Defiant and the Zephyrian flagship sent shockwaves across the galaxy. In the weeks that followed, something unprecedented happened. Species that had been conquered by the Zephyrians for centuries began to rebel. The Altarian, Republic emerged from hiding and attacked Zephyrian bases near their space. The Centauri Alliance openly declared war on the hegemony. Even small colonies that had never fought before picked up weapons and drove out their alien overlords. Morrison woke up in a hospital bed on New Haven, his body covered in bandages. He was alive, somehow pulled from the wreckage of his ship by rescue teams. Most of his crew had survived too, though they were all badly injured. The last thing he remembered was the collision with the Zephyrian flagship. Lieutenant Carter walked into his room using a crutch to support her injured leg. Her face lit up when she saw he was awake. "Captain, you've been unconscious for 2 weeks. You need to see what's happening outside." Morrison struggled to sit up, his ribs aching from the effort. Carter helped him to the window, and what he saw took his breath away. The space around New Haven was filled with ships, but these were not human vessels. Strange alien craft from dozens of different species floated alongside the remaining human fleet. "They came to help," Carter explained. "After word spread about our fight, species from across the galaxy started arriving. Some of them have been fighting the Zephyrians in secret for years. Others had given up hope until they heard about us." Chief Walsh entered the room, his arm in a sling but his face bright with excitement. "Captain, you won't believe what I've been working on. These alien engineers have technology we never dreamed of, but they want to learn from us too. They say our approach to solving problems is completely different from anything they've seen." Morrison looked confused. "Different how?" "We don't follow rules." Walsh grinned. "Every other species in the galaxy has rigid ways of thinking about technology and tactics. When something doesn't work, they try to make it work better. When something doesn't work for us, we try something completely different." Sergeant Brooks came in next, her usual tough expression replaced by something Morrison had never seen before. Wonder. "Sir, there are species out there that gave up fighting the Zephyrians. Hundreds of years ago, they had better weapons than us, better ships, better everything. But they lost because they couldn't adapt when their standard tactics failed." Morrison was beginning to understand. "And we could?" "We had to," Carter said. "We didn't have better weapons or ships. All we had was the refusal to give up and the willingness to try anything." Over the following days, Morrison learned the full scope of what had happened. The destruction of Overlord Kethmore had thrown the Zephyrian hegemony into chaos. Without their supreme leader, the various Zephyrian commanders were fighting among themselves. Some wanted to continue the war. Others, like War Commander Thexazal, had been so shaken by their defeat that they sued for peace. But the bigger change was in the galaxy itself. The alliance that had formed around New Haven was growing every day. Species that had been enemies for thousands of years were working together, united by the example the humans had set. Morrison received a visit from Admiral Hayes, the same officer, who had ordered him to retreat weeks earlier. Hayes looked older and tired, but also strangely relieved. "Morrison," Hayes said, sitting down beside the hospital bed. "Fleet Command wants to court-martial you for disobeying orders." Morrison nodded. He had expected this. "However," Hayes continued with a slight smile, "the President of Earth has other ideas. It seems that saving 12 million civilians and sparking a galactic revolution counts for something. You're being promoted to Admiral and given command of the new Allied fleet." Morrison shook his head. "Sir, I'm not sure I'm the right person for that job." "You're the only person for that job," Hayes replied. "These alien species didn't come here because of our technology or our military strength. They came because of what you and your crew represent. The idea that sometimes you have to stand up and fight even when you can't win." 6 months later, Morrison stood on the bridge of a new ship. It was not called the Defiant this time, but the Hope. It was built with technology from a dozen different species, but its heart was still human. The crew was mixed too, with humans working alongside aliens who had learned to appreciate the human way of thinking. Carter was his first officer again, now a captain in her own right. Walsh was the chief engineer of the entire Allied fleet, teaching alien engineers how to think creatively. Brooks had become the head of the new Unconventional Warfare Division, where her willingness to try anything fit perfectly. The old Defiant had been recovered from the wreckage of the Zephyrian flagship It was too damaged to repair, but it was not forgotten. The ship was taken to Earth orbit, where it was preserved as a monument. Millions of beings from across the galaxy came to see the small human vessel that had changed everything. Morrison often visited the monument when he was on Earth. He would stand in the restored bridge and remember the day his crew had decided to disobey orders and protect innocent people. It had seemed like such a small decision at the time, but it had changed the course of galactic history. The plaque on the monument was simple, written in the languages of every species in the new alliance. But the human version said it best. Memory of the UES Defiant and her crew. They held the line when the line needed to be held. They proved that courage is not the absence of fear, but the decision that something else is more important than fear. The galaxy was still dangerous. There were still wars and conflicts and injustices to fight. But now there was also hope. And the knowledge that sometimes, when everything seems impossible, one small ship and a determined crew can make all the difference.